Okay, so let's not waste too much time and let's just get to it. So this is basically the last part of our message UI sub-series, and we should be able to basically have the message boxes or the message bubbles UI, and also be able to set up the scene functionality as well alongside with it. Alright, so what are we going to do now? The first thing we want to quickly do is we want to go into our app folder here, and then we quickly go into the conversations, then go to the page.tsx. It's probably not here. It's not here. So I think we'll go into let me try to search for that. So that is, let's try conversation ID, yes, and the page.tsx. Then inside we come and then we set, so it's inside the body here, we set this initial messages here, and then we quickly set it to the messages. So we set it to the messages here, right, which is this message that is above over here. Okay, now after setting up like this, you can see that we are obviously going to get some errors over here, right? So what we'll do is we'll go into the body here like this. Then once we enter the body, we should be able to receive this initial messages, right? So let's quickly pass it inside like this. Say initial messages. Now that we have it like this, what we are going to do is we need to create an interface to help us define it, right? So say what interface body props is going to be what initial messages, and that is going to be set to a type of what full message type, like this, nice and clean. Then we set it like this, nice and clean. So right after doing this, we need to define it with the component here. So we say what react.fc, then what we pass in the body props over here like this, nice and clean. Alright, so right after passing it inside like this, what we want to quickly do is we'll come into the curly braces here inside here, and then we write what const messages. So we have messages, set messages, and then we quickly equate that to our use state, and we are going to import that, and then we pass in what the initial messages as its initial value. Okay, so which means that the messages that we are going to be getting using the get messages here, we're going to be passing all these messages into this initial message array here, and once we are done doing that, it should be able to populate these messages, right? So now our initial messages has been populated into this messages state here. Alright, then right after doing this, we need to basically come here, and we are going to write a bottom ref, and then this bottom ref is what is going to allow us to scroll down or navigate, automatically scroll down to the bottom of the page, just like what we did in our ChatGPT clone in the previous video before working on this one. So if you haven't looked it up, you can go and check it out. So yeah, then we have the use ref, and then this use ref, let's set it to null, and then let's give it the type of what HTML div element, nice and clean. So right after setting up like this, what we quickly want to do is we want to get the conversation ID. Let's not forget that our body has to be use client, or else we are going to be getting hydration errors when we start doing certain things, right? So use client, nice like this. Then we see what, so this is const, then const is going to open up this object which is going to say what, conversation ID. So we are taking this conversation ID from where, from use conversation. Nice and clean like this. All right, now that we have this use conversation that we have been able to import here, right, what is the next thing that we want to do? We quickly want to write a use effect function. So this use effect, let's use the snippets, and we can just pass, we can just take this out like this and then import our use effects nice and clean like this. Then right after importing it, what we can do is we can just say axios dot post. So axios dot post, right, axios dot post. Then we pass in what, we pass in our API slash conversations slash conversation ID and scene, nice and clean. Then right after we are done setting this up, we will just pass in conversation ID like this. All right, so basically we don't have this route yet, right? So when we try to test it, we are definitely going to be getting errors, right? So what this is basically supposed to do is it's supposed to set the conversation to be seen whenever the next user or the receiving user comes to open up the chat, right? Just like how we understand it works in general, right? So right after being able to set this up, let us quickly go into the API folder and then actually set up the real functionality there. So you can see it says API slash conversations, then inside conversations we have the dynamic conversation ID. So what we're going to do is we're going to create this conversation, make sure that the spelling is correct, conversation ID over here, right? Then inside here we make sure that we pass in what, the scene folder, okay. Then inside we say what, route.ts, okay. So that is how we work on that. And right after setting this up, right, what you want to quickly do is you want to come here and you want to start working on a few things, which is what, let's quickly export async. Then we create this function snippet here, then we'll say what, post, and then inside here we want to say that the parameter is what, request, parameter is request here, and then the type of this parameter is capital RQ, so capital request here. Then right after setting that up, we want to pass in a params. So this object params here, right, we are going to set it to this type. So we are saying what, params here, and we set it to an I params interface, right? So this I params interface is what we are about to create right here. So what we'll do is we'll just bring this one down, then we'll come and create. So we'll see what, interface is what, then we'll see what, I params. Then this I params, we're quickly going to open it up and then say conversation ID is what, string, nice and clean like this. Now you can see that our error is gone, and then inside we can now come and work on the real stuff. Right, so inside we are going to quickly say try catch. So I want us to use the snippets try catch. Let's set the type to be any for the error, and then let's quickly log out the error in case we face any. So we just say what we can say is, we can quickly say scene error message, and then we can quickly just set it to what, the error object here, so that it's very easy for us to identify where it's coming from. Then right after that, what we can do is you can just return a new next response here, so like this. Then we say what, internal server error, nice and clean. Then we set the status to be what, 500. Alright, nice. So right after setting this up, right, we can now move on to work on the real functionality. So what we first of all want to do is we want to first of all get the current user. So we just say what's current user, so const current user is going to be equal to, then we await get current user action, right? Then we initialize it like this, so you can see we just imported it right above there. Then right after doing that, we want to also get the conversation ID, so we see what, conversation ID, and then that conversation ID is going to be taken from the params, and since we are taking it like an object, we need to do it like this, nice and clean. Okay, so right after getting the conversation ID, let's start to make a few checks or perform a few checks. The first check is we want to check if there is no current user. Okay, so if there's no current user, there's no user logged in, so if there's no current user dot ID, or there's no current user dot email, right, then let us quickly return a new next response which says what, unauthorized, and we set the status of unauthorized to be what, 401, right? So 401, nice and clean. So right after setting this up, what we quickly want to do is we want to come down here. Okay, we want to come down here and set the conversation. Just not forget our const. Set the conversation to be what, await prisma. So await prisma dot what. So you can see over here it's allowing us to work with prisma, and like I said before in the previous part of the video, I said always make sure you import your prisma so you don't forget, because it will automatically work in development, but when you go to production you're going to get errors. So prisma, then you import that from @/ what, app / libs / what, prisma db. Alright, then we are going to take what, prisma.conversation, right? Then we are going to find unique. So inside here, inside this conversation that we are trying to find, where are we trying to find it, right? So find me a conversation whereby the ID is what, the conversation ID that we are getting, right? Then let's make sure that when we get it, we include, when we get the conversation, we include the following details, which is what, messages, and the messages we are going to be getting all the, so we are going to include, yeah, So the users inside the messages that I have seen it, we're going to set it to what? True. Okay, nice and clean. Then over here we'll quickly say that what we want the users to be true. So that's over here. Okay, nice and clean. Alright, so when we come down here, what we want to do is we want to come and check whether we found the conversation or not. Alright, so let's use the snippet. So we'd say what if there's no conversation, or if the conversation wasn't found. It's basically similar, basically the same thing. Then we can just return new next response. Then we can say conversation not found, conversation not found, or invalid conversation ID. So I mean, it's basically the same thing. So if you can't find the ID, if the ID can't be found, then it means the conversation is not can't be found, right? So if you like, we can even clear this. We can clear this like this, nice and clean, like this. Alright, then right after clearing it up like this, what we can do is we need to make sure that we pass in this status 400 like this, right? Or 404, the one that you feel is right for you, you can just use it, right? So right after setting up the conversation doesn't exist, what we can do is we can just come and see what last message here like this. So the last message, we are going to get it from the conversation that we just got dot messages. Then we look at what the conversation dot messages, conversations dot messages dot length. Then we get it from what the last conversation here. Yeah, sorry, nice and clean. So right after doing this, what we are going to say is, this is some basic JavaScript function or concept going on here, right? You see, you would usually get an array like this by passing it in the index, right? But here's the case. What we are trying to say is, if the total length of the array is 10, get me the last one by subtracting 1 from the 10 to get me the last one, like this, right? So it's pretty simple. All right, so that's how we are getting the last message. And what we are going to do is we're going to create this if here, and we say last message. So in case there's no last message, or we can't find the last message, what we are going to do is we are going to return next response dot JSON, right? Conversation, nice one. So right after working on the last message over here, what we quickly want to work on is the updated message. So we see what updated message over here, and then we are going to quickly equate it to await prisma dot message dot update. Then we will do what, quickly open this up, and we will say where what id is last message dot id like this, right? Then we'll see what include who, the sender, true, and then make sure you include the scene to be what, and make it true. And also after doing all that, just make sure that this the data that you're updating, right? So what are you updating? Scene. So we are trying to update the scene with what we want to connect what, so we connect the id of the scene to be what, current user id. Nice and clean like this. All right, great job. So what we're quickly going to do is we're going to come and return. So we'll come and return what, next response dot json. So next response dot json is going to be what, updated message, right? So that is basically it. So what we basically did here is quite simple. We are just trying to set up our conversation API in such a way that we can easily integrate it with pusher. So we first check for the conversation using the conversation ID. So when we don't find a conversation, obviously you see what we've done here. Then after we get the conversation, we can get the last message inside the conversation by going through the conversation dot messages and then getting the last item in that conversations array, in that messages array. And right after doing that, we want to update the message if we want to. That is, in this case, we are trying to update the scene. So that means if that means if another user or if the receiving user opens up the application, we want to make sure that we pass in that receiving users, like the receiving user opens up the application and opens up the conversation, we want to make sure that we are passing in that receiving user's ID inside the scene field, right? So that is basically it for setting up this route. And then so when we go into our body like this should work as we expect. Now the next thing that we want to quickly work on is inside here, right? So we have this return, we're already returning these bad boys, right? But we need to also be able to pass in that div that we set up for the bottom ref over here. So what we'll just do is I'll just create this div and then I'll delete all of these bad boys at the back, and I'll just add this slash here, right? Then inside here I'll just set the ref to be what, bottom ref, nice and clean. Then all we are going to do is what, set the class name to be what, we set the class name to be what, we set it to what, pt24, nice and clean. So padding top 24. So this is basically it. Then right after that, we want to quickly come here and then set up this iteration, right? So we want to say that what, take the messages array here, so messages here, and then make sure you map through. Then once you are mapping through, take each message each message and its index, and then once you are done taking them, make sure that you render a component we are about to create called what, message box. And inside this message box, what we quickly want to do is we want to first of all pass in the key. So the key for the message box is obviously going to be what, message.id. Then right after that, we want to make sure that the data, right, so the data field or data prop is going to take what, message here like this, and we say s last, right? So we check for s last, and then we see what's I, then we basically compare it to this message dot length, right? So if it's the same, the index of the mapped out message is the same as what the message dot length, the messages dot length minus what 1, right? So nice and clean setup like this. But as you can see, we're going to get errors. So how do we get rid of this? What we are quickly going to do is inside this component here, we're going to create the message box .csx, nice and clean like this. Then inside we would say what refce like this, and inside this message box, right, what we quickly want to do is we want to first of all take the data and then the is last properties that we passed here, right? So data and is last, nice and clean. Then we'll come here and say interface. So the interface message box props, then so message box props, then we take the data. The data is going to be what full message type, and we set the is last to be what an optional boolean, nice and clean. Then right after, we are going to have to come here and let our application recognize this interface by setting up like this message box props like this, right? Nice and clean. This is beautiful. Okay, so right after setting this up, what we quickly want to do is we want to come here and then collect a few details, right, before we work on our actual elements. So what are the details? First of all, we want to be able to get the session. Okay, so we say what session is equal to what use session. Okay, so we get the use session like this from our next auth / react over here, and we're going to come and check for some condition. So I want to check for the person that is actually logged in, the current user that is logged in, and we want to compare it with the message type. Like, we are using this to know the kind of position of where we are going to put our messages, because at the end of the day, we don't want to make all the messages line up here and make all the messages line up here. We need to know who is the sender and then who is on the receiving end, right, based off of the user that is logged in. So we check for its owner, right? So we say its owner. We'll check for the session dot data dot what session dot data dot user dot email like this. Then we compare it with what data dot sender dot email, nice and clean. So right after setting this up, what we're going to do is I'm going to say const scene list. Then this scene list is basically a filtering that we want to filter, right? We want to check for the users that have seen a message or that has been able to see a message that is inside a particular conversation, right? So whether it's a group chat or a single chat, you want to be able to find the users that have seen them. And then you also want to make sure that you also want to make sure that when you are getting the list of users that have seen the message, you want to make sure that you are taking out you, the current user, your ID, right? So because you don't want to list out yourself as a seen person, like you are the one in the conversation. Why are you listing yourself as a seen person, right? So basically that's like that's like a high level idea of what we're trying to implement here, right? So we just take the data dot scene right here. All right, then we say what, or it's an empty array, right? Let's make sure we pass this in a bracket so that we can come and pass what, filter. So just filter it like this, right? Then inside we take user, and then inside this user, what we are going to do is what, user email, user.email, like this. Then we check, let's make sure that it is not the same as, so it's not the same as the sender dot email like this, right? So right after setting up like this, what you quickly want to do is you want to come here and then map through. Okay, so you map through. Once you get once you get the right array list you are looking for, you can come and then map through that array list like this. Okay, then you output what, the user.name inside this scene list here. And then once you are done, you want to make sure that you are listing them in a certain kind of way, in a certain formatted kind of way. So it's going to be what, this with a comma and a space. So what you're going to be having is something like John or Kojo, Kofi, John, and Jane, and John and Jane. Yeah, right. So yeah, don't mind how I mixed the capital letters, but yeah, these are the names. Like, this is the formats that they're going to be listed out as, right? So I just cleaned that up, and right after doing that, we still need to be able to create certain variables that is going to store certain stylings that we'll be using. So let's create the first one, which is what's the container. So we say what, container is equal to, then for this one we want to use the CLSX because of the conditional styling that we are going to be using. So inside here, let's quickly create this. Then we say what, flex gap, right, gap 3, flex gap 3 p4, right? Then let's quickly check for its owner. So its owner, so in case its owner, make sure that it is on the right side like this. So for that we'll just see what, justify, and like this, you get it. So that is basically it for the container. Then the next thing we are going to work on is the avatar. So for the avatar, what we are going to do is, I'll just say what, CLSX like this, and then we have as owner like this, and we have order 2 like this, right? So right after setting this up, what we need to do is to say const what, say const const body const body. Okay, so const body, then we say what, CLSX, and then we give it the flex. So we give it the flex code gap 2, right? Then we come here and then we check for its owner, right? So here we come and say what, its owner. So when its owner exists, let's make sure that the styling for the body is what, items end, right? Nice and clean. So right after setting up for the body, we need one more power styling, and that is the message styling. So for that, let's not forget const, then message, we equate it to what, CLSX, like this. Then right after that, what we want to do is you can come and then create, so see what, text sm, then w fit, then overflow heading, then we say what, then we come here and then we come, so we come here and then we'll come and see what is owner. So when it's owner, we want to pass in a few things to style the bubble, the message bubble. So what we are going to say is what we say, let's set the bg to be what, indigo. So bg indigo 500, bg indigo 500. Then we set the text to be what, white, nice and clean. But in case there was no owner, then what we want to do is what, bg gray 100, bg gray 100, like this, nice and clean. We are not done, we are left with the last thing, that is what, data dot image. Okay, so in case there is a data dot image, what we quickly want to do is I want to quickly come and then see what's rounded MD, right? Then we set the image to be what, padding 0, and then in case there is no image, what we want to do is what, rounded full, like this, then py2, then px1, so ps1. So yeah, that is basically it for the styling variables that we have here. Alright, so they are quickly going to make our work a whole lot more easier. So what I'll do is I'll just create a class name and then set the first class name to a container as we promised. Then here what we're going to do is I'll just hit enter like this. Then I would say what, I can just open up this div like this, then I'll create a class name here, clean up the double quotes, and I'll just pass in with avatar like this. Alright, now right after setting that up, what we quickly want to do is inside this avatar, what we can do is you can import it like this to avatar, and once we are done importing, we want to pass in the user prop of the avatar to be what, send data dot send. Okay, so let's quickly look at the changes and make sure that the terminal is running. Okay, it says message box is not defined, and that is true. So for that, we just say what, we just import the message box like this, nice and clean, to get rid of the error, and then we can see our changes in real time. Okay, so as you can see, this is the avatar that we have here, right? And since we are the sender, you can see that our profile picture is here, and you can see our online status too showing as well. Alright, so inside the message box, we can quickly move on to work on the rest of it. So here, right after here, we want to come under here and then create another div and then give it the styling of what, body, right? So we'll give it the body style like this. Then inside this body style, what we want to do is the first class name for this div is what flex. We want to create a div with a class name flex. Now inside this class name over here, what we want to do is we want to make sure that the item center and then gap 1, right? Then when you come inside here like this, right, when you come inside here, what you want to do is you want to have text sm, a div with text sm like this. Then you want to make sure that the text is GUI 500 like this. Okay, then here, over here, you can send in the data.sender.name, sender.name. Okay, so you can see it is showing right here. Now when you see it bouncing left and right like that, that's because it simply hasn't rendered it fully. So it's like you just need to allow it to load, to completely load, and then everything will just fall into place. Alright, so right after doing that, what we quickly want to do is you can just come and copy and paste this same thing. Then we set this one to what, extra small, and then we set it to what, text gray 400. Like this. Then we'll come and then we say what, format. So this format, you are going to be getting it from datefns like this. So when I scroll up, you see datefns at the top like this. Alright, then right after we have this format, what you want to do is you want to open up this bracket. Then you see what, you see new date object. New date object is going to be what, the data dot what, created at. Then you want to make sure that you come outside the brackets, that holds the data dot created. Come outside that bracket, okay, and then you pass in this format. So p, small p, make sure it is small p so that you get what you are actually looking for. So as you can see, the time has been updated over here, nice and clean. So right after doing that, you want to quickly come down 2 divs below here, and then you want to have this div, and then this div is going to have the class name of what, message. Okay, so message, nice and clean. So inside this message, what we want to do is we want to first of all check for data.image like this. Okay, let's quickly check the spelling. So we want to quickly check, we say oh, okay, so inside here like this, right? So inside here like this, right, what are we trying to do? We quickly want to see what image. Then this image, we are going to get it from next/image like this. Then we are going to pass in a few attributes, properties, or yeah. So inside we'll just say what, image like this. Then outside here we see height. Then we set the height to be what, 288. Then we set the width as well to be what, I want to set the width as well to be 288. So, and then we set what, the src to be what, data.image. You can see right here, and then you can see our image appear right here. And then what we quickly want to do is we want to start passing in certain class names, and the class name is what, so we have object cover, right? And then cursor pointer, then we have hover, then it will scale, right? So when we hover, we want it to scale by 110, and then we want to set it to be a transitional scale. Then we say that what it has to translate as well. So I'll just cut this out, and then you can see it is here nice and clean like this. Alright, so knowing or seeing how this has turned out, we can now come here, alright, and then quickly create this div. So we want to create a div. Now we pass in what the data dot body nice and clean. Alright, now as you can see, everything is showing up the way we expect it to be showing up. Alright, so that is basically it for what we have to work with about the message. And then you can see that the message has been sent nicely, and I don't know, but there's something about this message bubble that makes me want to change something about it. So let me quickly look at, so let me say, let's give it so I think if we make this 4, no, okay, yeah, so if we make it 2, so that is basically P, let's give it P3 and see. Yeah, I think P3 is way better. I like this one way better. So yeah, I like this message way better. So yeah, that is basically it. So yeah, so now that we have all of these bad boys here, there's one more thing that we forgot to add, and then that is going to be the scene view here. So how we are going to add how we are going to be able to add the UI that allows users to see who has seen this message in a one-on-one conversation or in a group chat. What we are going to do is right under here, we'll just come and open up this, and then we see it's last. So if it's the last message, right, or sorry, or we check, basically we are checking if it's the last message and the message belongs to the current logged in user, and it is what the scene list, the last what, so the scene list dot length, so that means the scene list dot length is not empty, right? So greater than 0. Then we want to what, we want to render a div. We want to render a div that basically takes what, that says what, seen by, then we can now pass in what, the scene list, nice and clean. Alright, now right after working on this, we should be able to see what is going on in our chat. Alright, so we quickly just set this up nice and clean. I want this to quickly load up, and then we can test it out. Alright, let us quickly come here, make sure that the scene ID is empty. So it says, well, look at the image above. Let's make sure that it is empty, because so yeah, let's remove this one. Yeah, so I did test it before, that is why I'm taking it off, so that we can see the right data. Alright, so I was finally able to delete that, and I want us to quickly test it. Alright, so what we're going to quickly do to test it is, let's quickly maximize, and this is the full screen now. So what we'll quickly do is, now I've sent the message, right? So we just log out over here, and then we can log back in as, yeah, so we need to fix this. We would fix that later. Then I would log back in using the Google. So you can see we are logged back in using what, our soluservant over here. Then I'll go into the test user here like this, right? So I'm just going to click on the conversation like this, right? If you remember, this is it. Inside the page.tsx, no, I think it's the body.tsx here. Oh, come on. Yeah, so you can see, so now that I have opened the conversation here, you would see that it will just write here that last or seen by, right? And then you see the username here. So if I log back out, I still don't know why this is like this, but I'll make sure we fix it, because once we log out, we should be able to be out of the route totally, right? If I try to look at this, it says auth session 200, but it seems we are still inside the same route where we are not supposed to be. And if you refresh, it's still like this, but don't worry, I'll make sure we fix this before we end this tutorial. So here, then we can come back as what, test user like this at gmail.com, and then we can log back in like this. So log back in, and if we click on this conversation right here, you can see that it has been written nicely like this. Now we can quickly style this and make it look better, right? We can quickly style it and make it look better. So let us quickly open this up, and we'll just go into the message box over here. Then we'll quickly come, and then we'll say class name. So the class name is going to be what, text x. So say text xs. Then we see what, font light like this, and then we see text gray 500 like this. And then once we go back, you should see it looking nice and clean like this. Alright, so I'm glad we were able to come to the conclusion of the message UI building, and so in the next video we'll go into the profile drawer. Alright, so hopefully I'll see you in the next one.